Hi, everybody. Welcome to Predict and Avoid Workforce Challenges. This webinar is presented by NetTime Solutions, and we're glad to have you with us for the next half an hour. For those of you who are on Twitter, our marketing team is going to be live tweeting throughout the webinar, so please feel free to follow along, and you can share your thoughts using @NetTime and hashtag Workforce Challenges. My name is Jennifer Spencer. I'm the Director of Marketing here at NetTime Solutions, and I'm also joined today by Ruli Garcia, who is one of our technical sales engineers here at NetTime. I'm working on getting Ruli going on Twitter, but if you'd like to, you can reach out to me at Jen Spencer. So in today's webinar, we're going to dive into some of the most common workforce challenges that we see among our clients. And with each challenge, we're going to share a solution that comes with using a cloud-based automated time and attendance software platform. So the common challenges we'll be covering today include PTO balances, tardy employees, disparate systems, mergers and acquisitions, and overtime. And if we have some time, we might talk a little bit about offsite employees, but if not, then we'll follow up with that after the webinar. And as always with our webinars, we're going to close with a Q&A session. So as questions arise, I encourage you to go ahead and enter them into that control panel of GoToWebinar, and we'll do our very best to answer all of your questions at the end. But timing is just very important to us. Your time's important. So if we surpass our 30-minute allotment, just know that we'll personally respond to each and every one of your questions immediately following the live webinar. So I'd like to start by asking you to just imagine how successful we could all be if we could see into the future and predict any business challenge that might come to light. So when I think about this from a workforce management perspective, we'd always have the appropriate number of employees staffed in every area of our business, and that would virtually eliminate the need for overtime. We'd never have to go through this laborious job of manually adjusting timesheets from discrepancies in projected hours versus actual hours, or from mathematical errors or policy changes. And it sounds pretty great, but unfortunately, most of us are not gifted in the art of clairvoyance, and we don't have the luxury of having a fully operational crystal ball in our desk drawers. At least I don't, and maybe you guys do. But that's where we come in and we can help you. Now, we can't tell you if it's going to storm next week, and we don't have those winning lottery numbers, but with a cloud-based time and attendance software solution like stratustime, we can help you have the data in hand and the systems in place to avoid workforce challenges before they arise. So go ahead and put those crystal balls and tarot cards aside, and let's walk through some everyday labor management situations and see the impact a cloud-based time and attendance solution can make on your business operations. So the first workforce challenge of the day here has to do with a misunderstanding involving paid time off. And I like to share with you a real life story right from my personal management diaries. And just to preface this story is a few years old, and it took place when I was working for another company. So one day I'm at work, and our payroll manager, who by the way also handles all of our accounts payable, so she's got a pretty full plate, she calls me to let me know that one of my direct reports hadn't accrued enough PTO to cover his week-long vacation. This vacation that has already been approved, it's already been taken, the pictures are already on Facebook. And she tells me this because his paycheck is going to reflect this deficiency, and I need to contact him and let him know that he is going to expect a much smaller sum in his biweekly paycheck. Now, first of all, I'm utterly shocked because I had asked this employee if he had enough PTO to cover this vacation before I approved it, and he was quite certain that he did. So now I have to contact this employee and explain the situation. And regardless of who's to blame for this misunderstanding, I now have a deeply disengaged employee on my hands who's extremely unhappy and is sharing these emotions with anyone in the building. So you can almost hear the sound of productivity plummeting. And it's been interesting relaying this story to fellow managers and other colleagues, and even those in that company's finance department, because some say the employee's at fault, that he's responsible for managing his own benefits and being aware of how many hours of paid time off or vacation he's accrued. And others have pointed fingers at me, the manager, and have noted that, hey, the manager's approval is there as a part of the checks and balances, and had I verified his hours with payroll, this wouldn't have happened. And I guess both are true. But unfortunately, it just wasn't very easy for either of us to access this kind of information. The employee, he has his PTO balance on his pay stub, but that document doesn't include the most up-to-date information, since like most organizations, our payroll was paid in arrears. But what's clear to me now is that regardless of where the blame ultimately lies, this very unfortunate situation could have easily been avoided with a more transparent system for processing time off accruals. So I'm going to hand the controls here over to Ruli, who's going to show us a solution to this very issue.
Thank you, Jennifer. So currently on your screen, what you are seeing is an example of the employee dashboard. One of the ways we solve this problem is your employees are given access to their accruals and their different time off banks directly on this dashboard. So on this next screen, what you'll notice is they've now opened up their time off accruals. So directly on the screen, they have the ability to view their different balances to their banks. They can also see any time off requests they have made in the past and whether those have been approved or denied. So far we're just summarizing what they have. However, when they go to actually make a request, as you'll see in the next screen, we have a forecasting calculator that you'll notice there to the right. And taking into account that employee's specific accrual rules, it's going to tell them whether or not they actually have the required number of hours to make that request. Now, we do have the ability in stratustime to program the system to allow them to go into a negative balance if that is your policy. We also have the ability to put a max negative cap on their balance. So a couple different ways for safekeeping it. Now, as soon as they submit that time off request, their manager is going to get a notification on their dashboard, and with a couple of clicks, they'll be able to approve or deny it. Now, from the manager's dashboard, as you can see, they get access to a coverage calendar when they're approving or denying, just an extra feature to make sure they have enough coverage. However, they do have a little calculator, and if you'll notice on these different balances, should the manager want to double check, they can click on that calculator symbol you're seeing to make sure that employee is going to have the appropriate hours. However, keep in mind that according to the rules we've already put in place, this request would not be able to get to you if the employee did not have the number of hours they needed to go ahead and make that full request.
Great, thank you so much. I truly wish I would have had the software in that situation, because when you have HR systems in place that allow for this total transparency, and when it comes to important items like employee benefits, that transparency, it fosters a culture of employee and employer trust. And it's when information is not accessible that this type of trust can easily disintegrate and can result in a decrease in employee engagement. Not just during that hour that I had this conversation with my employee, and not just for the day that we lost due to that constant chatter of fairness and blame, but situations like this one, they compound over time, and it's often very hard to go back and repair that kind of damage. The next workforce challenge we'll cover has to do with tardy employees. So let's say you're managing an employee and she's consistently showing up late for work. And perhaps you address the problem here and there by mentioning the tardiness casually, hoping if you draw attention to the infraction, she'll adjust her behavior. Well, while you're addressing this issue, maybe you haven't taken the time to keep track of these small, though numerous infractions. And this situation can easily snowball, and suddenly the tardiness has now become a way of life. The thing is, your job isn't just to make sure your employees are at work on time. You have other responsibilities. But the documentation of these infractions and the redirection of this employee is quite critical, because before you know it, this situation can cost your company a great deal more than a few minutes here and there. So beyond those lost minutes in the morning, what else are you losing by failing to document and redirect your tardy employees? Let's consider the impact these infractions have on other employees in the office. So I'm thinking about those employees who are leaving 20 minutes earlier because they know that traffic on a Monday morning is going to be worse than the other days of the week. Or the employees who arrange for a friend or a family member to take their kids to school so that they can be sure to arrive at their workplaces on time. When those people see another employee repeatedly get away with even the most minor infractions, this breeds resentment and will encourage disengagement. And executive coaches and HR professionals that I've met have always said that companies lose their A players when organizations frankly just accept the shortcomings of B, C, and even D players. And if you've ever worked with one of these types of employees, I'm sure you'll agree that it's hard to stay fully engaged when coworkers are consistently allowed to underperform. So really, do we have a solution for this issue of chronically late employees?
As a matter of fact, we do. There are a number of different ways to be notified and track your employees' different attendance violations, tardiness being one of them, but we can also track early outs, missed meals, and a number of other pieces. So within stratustime, we have both attendance exceptions and alerts. Alerts can be used to actually create a pop-up and prompt the managers so that they know when an employee exception occurs, as you currently see on the screen. So my employee Kate Walker had a late in, and there's the date that occurred. So I can actually have a pop-up window tell me that. But if the pop-up window is not a necessity, we can still populate all of your attendance exceptions in their own separate window marked by the yellow yield sign you see right behind this pop-up. So any of your late ins, your very late ins, your early outs, all of those can still be tracked in that window back there where your managers can always be aware of what is going on. Now, should you want to further escalate that, we have what's called a points tracking module. And as you can see, this is an automatic communication because basically at a threshold, so my employee, for instance, let's say we had a ruling here where every time they were late, they got 1 point. And at 3 points within a rolling 3-month period, for instance, they're going to get a warning basically telling them that they have violated our attendance exceptions. So you can have something like this automatically go out to the employee. Now, we also have the ability to have attachment go out with that, as you can see on my next screen. So, should you need signed documentation, for example, at one of your attendance thresholds, your employee would have the ability to print this out and turn this back in to their respective managers. So our points policies are very customizable and can be used to record a number of different attendance infractions, as I mentioned before. Now, we also have the ability to reward employees with positive points for something like perfect attendance. So there are ways to give points back. And I also want to mention is you can have multiple points policies. So should you have different groups of employees who need to work on a different policy, no problem. Should you only need to assign that points tracking policy to a set group of employees, that is not a problem either.
Excellent. The next challenge that we're going to cover here has to do with working with disparate systems. So in the IT world, a disparate system refers to a computer data processing system that was designed to operate as a fundamentally distinct data processing system without exchanging data or interacting with other computer data processing systems. So let's assume you currently use one type of software to track time and attendance and another to track payroll. And each employee has an account and tracks their hours worked, as well as requests for time off, before notifying his or her manager, who approves it in this case, and sends it to you. So at this point, you download it and you upload it to your payroll system. Well, what kind of challenge might arise here? Maybe you happen to notice that one of the employees has made a mistake that his manager didn't catch. You email the manager with some clarifying questions, as well as the original document with your amendments. Meanwhile, the employee, let's say, realizes the mistake, fixes it, notifies his manager with a new version. So now there are 3 versions of the same document in circulation and several employees spending time on this one small error. So this is just one example of the issues that disparate systems can cause. And any opportunity for even minor human error can have large ripple effects throughout an entire company. In the HR software world, we come across a number of companies with platforms that they tout their integrations. And unfortunately, a lot of these integrations take the form of file-based transfers. So here's what a file-based transfer from time and attendance software into payroll system looks like. So You download data from your time and attendance system as an Excel type spreadsheet like a CSV or XLS file. The spreadsheet is then manually verified, possibly edited and corrected, and then the file is uploaded into a payroll system. So the process is not only time intensive, but it also allows for human error. So the difference is that with a web service integration, your company can integrate software platforms seamlessly. So your systems can share data either unilaterally or bilaterally, all depending on the needs of your business. And web services integrations can either be real-time or scheduled every night or every hour. And unlike a file-based integration, the communication stream between software platforms isn't start and stop, but rather the data flows naturally between the two platforms to achieve optimal integration. And one of the reasons our web services in particular are so flexible is they're both platform and language independent, and they allow organizations to communicate data without intimate knowledge of each other's IT systems behind the firewall. There are actually some web services that don't support all markup languages, so you'll want to review any documentation that your software provider has to offer. So now Ruli's going to show us briefly the API library that we have so you can get a better idea of what I'm referring to.
Thank you. And as you'll see on the screen, we just wanted to show that we do indeed have a vast API library. And so within the next screen, you'll be able to see the different languages we have. So there's XML. We also have JSON or SOAP if that's something you need access to. Now again, these are this is an extremely customizable piece and would need a talk between the tech people on both sides. So should you want to dive into this deeper, contact your sales representative here at NetTime Solutions. They can be reached at 800-561-6366. And at that point, we'll be able to dive further and see exactly how these two systems can talk in either real time or periodically throughout the day using our API library and web services.
Excellent. So another challenge that we face in the workforce comes out of mergers and acquisitions. And this is something we see quite a lot in the technology sector. So I'd like to briefly share one of our clients' stories. This is a manufacturing company that has grown substantially over the last 5 years, organically, but also as a result of strategic acquisitions. And with each company that they acquired, they also took on the essential labor management pieces of each entity, things like time clocks, pay rules, and pay policies. And this company was going to keep on acquiring smaller companies. This was clearly part of their overall growth plan. So the IT and HR departments knew that they needed software that would not only be able to handle their current complexities, but would also be able to grow with them. So how complex is this organization? Well, they have both union and non-union hourly employees that are working in 10 different locations in the United States. That all results in over 60 different pay rules and pay policies. And they didn't know what they didn't yet know, right? The next acquisition might bring about even more complexity. So what could they do today that would ensure that they would be supported tomorrow? So the thing is, during a merger or acquisition, fear of the unfamiliar can really cripple employee engagement. And experts in this area always recommend extensive planning and over-communication to really pre-address any employee concerns. But stability and trust can quickly unravel should employee paychecks and benefits be impacted at all. So really tell us a little bit about how stratustime is configured to be able to grow with your company.
So stratustime has a number of different capabilities, all of which you don't have to use. We have plenty of clients who jump on and start using certain features within the system, and as they continue to grow and need the other features, add them in. For instance, maybe you need to, maybe originally you just have your employees record their time, but as you continue to grow, you would like to get more labor tracking reporting. And so you have them track their time to specific labor levels to get reporting. Or maybe you decide that, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, you are having too many attendance infractions, and so you need to put in place a points policy. And that can be something that can be added later as well. So your system can be configured to do what you need it to do today, but as you continue to grow, different pieces can be added. Different policies can be manipulated or added as well. So should you add a completely different branch to your organization that needs a completely different set of rules, that is no problem. Stratustime will continue to grow with you and continue to meet the needs of your individual employee groups.
Okay, this next one is a doozy, that unplanned overtime. It's perhaps the most frustrating workforce challenge because it's directly tied to your company's bottom line. So I have a scenario for you. Let's say you have an employee and that employee comes into work one Tuesday morning, clocks in as usual, goes about her job. Let's call her Sharon. Okay, so after working for 5.5 hours, Sharon is nearing the end of her shift when another employee calls in sick. So what happens next? You need coverage. So as the manager, you see Sharon and you ask, okay, hey, can you cover this sick employee shift? And she says yes, absolutely. Except now she's working a 12-hour day instead of her scheduled 6. So unfortunately, there were other employees on staff that day who were coming in who could have absorbed that sick employee's schedule without hitting overtime. But how were you to know? You were reacting, you were responding. You didn't have time to go back and check the files and check the schedule and see what your world looked like. So really it's going to show us how the situation could be avoided in a very easy, non-laborious way.
So there are a few different ways for us to monitor our employees with approaching overtime. The first one I want to mention is directly from the manager's dashboard that you can see in our background. We actually can have a category on there where you can choose to monitor any employee approaching overtime, and you can actually set that threshold. So maybe I'd like that box to remain blank until the employee is within 10 hours of approaching overtime. What I've set up on the screen for you here is an actual alert. Looks familiar to what we talked about with that late in a little bit earlier. But along the same rules, I can set an alert in place that tells me when my employee not necessarily has reached overtime, but when they are approaching overtime, so that I can be proactive about it and know what is happening with my workforce. Now, these are just a couple of ways to be notified from the manager's dashboard. However, we do have a number of different reports. Now, our reports can be set to automatically generate as well. So not only can you monitor this from the manager's dashboard, but you can set reports to automatically generate that will tell you where your workforce is in terms of approaching overtime. And again, those reports can be stored within our system, but can also be emailed to you. So for any of your managers or supervisors that may be out and about frequently, they can still get those by email to constantly know where their employees stand and who may be approaching those overtime thresholds.
Great, wonderful. And I think I just want to comment that this functionality is also a part of what we have in our ACA module. So for those of you who are interested in tracking employee hours to ensure that you're compliant with the Affordable Care Act regulations, this is the same kind of functionality. This is the same kind of flow that you would be able to have for that as well. So with all of these challenges that we've addressed, the common thread really throughout all for me has been this idea of clarity. Is it possible to operate a business successfully without real-time time and labor management software? Sure. But in each and every challenging situation, the transparency of labor management data can really help managers and employees predict these challenges and even stop them before they become a reality. So we've got about 5 minutes left of our scheduled time. So I'd like to open the webinar up for any questions that you might have. So if you haven't done so, you can go ahead and enter those questions right into that GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll answer them right as they come in. Okay, Our first question here is, how many different types of time off can the Accruals module handle? For example, I have vacation days, sick days, jury duty, bereavement, etc. Is there a cap? Julie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. There actually is not a limit to the number of different time off banks you can offer your employees, and there are different settings for those pieces. So just because they have that bank does not mean it's necessarily one they have the ability to request from. So we do have the ability to change how those function, but no cap on how many you can offer your employees.
The next question is about the points tracking, that feature. So can only hourly employees be enrolled in points tracking? What if you have exempt employees who aren't required to clock in, but you have someone who's often late or leaves early? Can the system generate the same types of notices?
So a points tracking policy does need to be tied to a schedule. So technically any employee who has a scheduled time, because we wouldn't know if they were late unless we knew when to expect them. So as long as an employee has a schedule, we can tie them to a points tracking policy.
The next question is about integration. Do you integrate with ERP systems or only with HRIS and payroll systems? And I can answer that. Yes, we do. In fact, we have an integration with NetSuite as one of our ERP systems that we're integrated with, and hundreds of other software platforms. But if there's something specific that you're interested in integrating with, just let us know, and we'll see if it's already been built. And if it hasn't, then that's something that we can actually go ahead and architect. Okay, doesn't look like we have any other questions. But if anything comes up, please, you can give us a call or send us an email. You can email over at info@nettimesolutions.com, and we can respond to you directly. So thank you so much for joining us for our webinar on predicting and avoiding workforce challenges. We're going to email all of the registrants a recording of this webinar, and it's also going to be posted on our website and on our YouTube channel. If you know that you'd like to learn more about stratustime and you want to take a demo of it, see if it's the right automated time and attendance solution for you, you can give us a call at 1-800-561-6366, or you can visit us online at nettimesolutions.com, and you can go on there and request your custom demonstration and provide us with the days and times that work best for you. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.